Maya Jimenez gripped the polished steering wheel of the Bentley Mulsanne, her knuckles barely white. It was a familiar feeling, the smooth leather under her palms, the low thrum of a powerful engine at her command. But the context was jarringly different. Gone were the roaring crowds, the smell of burnt rubber on a racetrack, the adrenaline-fueled symphony of a Formula One, Pittsburgh lane. Now there was only the hushed, climate-controlled silence of a luxury sedan and the incessant, grating voice of her new employer, Mr. Harrison Sterling. At 32, Maya had already lived a lifetime that most people could only dream of. Raised in a working-class neighborhood in East Los Angeles, the daughter of a mechanic, she had grease under her fingernails before she could properly write her own name. Her life had been a blur of karting championships, grueling training regimens, and a meteoric rise through the ranks of motorsports, culminating in a 3-season stint with the midfield F1 team. She'd been a trailblazer, a fighter, a woman who had carved her name into the bedrock of a male-dominated world. But a near-fatal crash at Spa-Francorchamps and the subsequent, grueling recovery had forced her into an early retirement. The fire was still there, but the nerve wasn't. So she'd sought quiet, anonymity, a life away from the relentless glare of the media. Driving was still what she knew best, so a private chauffeur position, with its promise of quiet professionalism, seemed like a perfect, if ironic, fit. Her first client had been a dream, an elderly, kind-hearted tech mogul who respected her privacy and valued her unparalleled skill. But after his passing, his portfolio, including his personal staff, was acquired by his company's new CEO, Harrison Sterling. Harrison was everything Maya had despised in the F1 paddock's more privileged circles. He was a man who had been born on third base and genuinely believed he'd hit a triple. His wealth was old, inherited from a grandfather who'd actually built the empire Sterling now helmed with a combination of arrogance and profound incompetence. He was obsessed with the superficial, the right schools, the right last names, the right zip codes. To him, the world was a simple hierarchy, and he was firmly at the apex. From the moment he'd first laid eyes on Maya, his disdain was palpable. He'd circled her, his gaze dismissive as if inspecting a piece of used furniture. "So you're the driver," he'd said, his tone thick with condescension. The agency had provided her stellar references, highlighting her precision, punctuality, and discretion, omitting, at Maya's insistence, the more spectacular details of her resume. "Yes, sir. Maya Jimenez." "It's a pleasure to meet you," she'd replied, her voice even and professional, offering a hand he pointedly ignored. Jimenez, he'd mused aloud, tasting the name with theatrical distaste. "I trust you can handle a vehicle of this caliber. It's not a beat-up sedan you're ferrying your family around in." The jab at her ethnicity and presumed class was as subtle as a sledgehammer, but Maya's face remained a mask of professional calm. Years of dealing with condescending sponsors and sexist journalists had forged an armor of impenetrable composure. "I'm confident I can meet your standards, Mr. Sterling," she'd said, her voice betraying no hint of the fury coiling in her gut. The implicit conflict became a daily reality. He treated her not as a person but as an extension of the car. He'd snap his fingers to get her attention, toss his briefcase onto the passenger seat without a word of thanks, and conduct loud, obnoxious phone calls where he openly mocked the help. He constantly critiqued her driving, despite her movements being so smooth they were practically imperceptible. "A little faster, woman, I haven't got all day. Take the corner tighter, do you even know how to drive?" Each comment was a small, sharp jab, a reminder of her station in his eyes. He saw a lowly driver, a servant, and he couldn't fathom that the woman behind the wheel possessed more skill in her little finger than he had in his entire, cosset body. Maya endured it all, her jaw tight, her focus on the road. She needed the job, the quiet life, but every mile with Harrison Sterling was a test of her hard-won control. She was the unsung hero, her past glories shrouded in deliberate obscurity, while he, the snob, cruised obliviously through a life he hadn't earned, never suspecting that his driver was a legend hiding in plain sight. The simmering tension was destined to boil over. The catalyst was a high-stakes merger meeting, a deal Harrison believed would cement his reputation as a visionary leader rather than a fortunate son. The meeting was being held at the exclusive clubhouse of a private golf course, a bastion of old money and corporate power. The potential partners were a German automotive tech firm, a company known for its ruthless efficiency and innovative engineering. For Harrison, this wasn't just about business, it was about acceptance into a world he desperately wanted to conquer. All morning his anxiety had manifested as heightened cruelty towards Maya. He'd found fault with her route, the car's temperature, and even the insolent way she said, "Good morning, sir." When they arrived, he threw a final, venomous instruction at her. "Stay with the car." I might need you to fetch things. And for God's sake, don't talk to anyone. You're just the driver. Try to look the part. He strode off towards the grand entrance without a backward glance. Maya parked the Bentley in the designated chauffeur's area, the picture of professionalism. Hours passed. She read a book, meditated, and mentally relived a qualifying lap at Monaco, a far more pleasant use of her time. Late in the afternoon, her phone buzzed. It was Harrison's frantic text. Forgot the revised P&L statements in my study. Get them. Now. Meeting starts in 30 minutes. This was classic Harrison. Unprepared. Blaming others for his own incompetence. Maya calculated the route. It would be tight, but she could do it. Engaging the Bentley sport mode, she drove with a controlled fury, a precision that would have terrified any normal passenger. She retrieved the files and raced back, the powerful engine a low growl under her expert command. She arrived with minutes to spare, her composure unruffled, a stark contrast to the sweat beading on Harrison's brow. She found him on the veranda, surrounded by his team and the German executives who were enjoying a pre-meeting coffee. Harrison, flustered and embarrassed, saw her approaching and his face contorted with rage. This was his moment, and the appearance of his lowly driver, a reminder of his own forgetfulness, was an intolerable intrusion. There you are, he boomed, his voice dripping with theatrical fury, ensuring everyone turned to watch. What took you so long? Do you have any idea how important this is? Maya held out the file. You have 5 minutes, Mr. Sterling. The traffic was considerable. Her calm, efficient response only fueled his rage. He needed a scapegoat. He snatched the file from her hand and turned to the assembled group, a sneer playing on his lips. My apologies, gentlemen. It's impossible to find good help these days. You give them a simple job, a single responsibility, and they still manage to fail. He then turned his full, public scorn on Maya. This is what happens when you try to give people a chance. They get ideas above their station. He took a step closer, lowering his voice into a menacing, yet clearly audible hiss. You were hired to drive a car. That's it. You are not part of this. You are not an executive assistant. You are a chauffeur. You park the car, you wait, and you keep your mouth shut. The other executives looked on, their expressions a mixture of shock and discomfort. They were used to corporate hardball, but this was a different kind of cruelty, personal, public, and deeply classist. Maya stood isolated in the center of their attention, the manicured green of the golf course a surreal backdrop to her humiliation. She tried to maintain her professional detachment, but the injustice stung. Her past, her skills, her very identity were being erased and replaced by this man's petty, ugly caricature. Mr. Sterling, I was only following your direct instruction, she said, her voice tight but even. Your instruction, Harrison scoffed, his voice rising again, is to be invisible. But you can't help yourself, can you? You have to insert yourself. You were just a driver, know your place. He gestured dismissively with his hand as if shooing away a fly. Now get back to the car before you embarrass me further. Maya's jaw was clenched so tight it ached. Her fists were balled in the pockets of her tailored jacket. The world seemed to shrink to this single excruciating moment. The smug, triumphant look on Harrison's face, the averted gazes of the onlookers, and the overwhelming feeling of being utterly alone, stripped of her dignity by a man who wasn't fit to polish her racing trophies. Maya held her ground, refusing to retreat under Harrison's venomous glare. The shame was a hot flush on her skin, but beneath it, the cold defiance that had served her so well on the track began to solidify into a shield. She would not let him see her break. Just as the silence stretched to an unbearable tautness, a new voice cut through the air, crisp and accented with German precision. Mr. Sterling, you will be silent now. All eyes snapped to the speaker. It was Klaus Richter, the formidable CEO of the German firm, a man whose name was synonymous with automotive innovation. Richter was in his late 50s, with sharp blue eyes and a presence that commanded attention without needing to raise his voice. He was a self-made titan, an engineer by training who had built his company from a small workshop into a global powerhouse. He had been watching the entire exchange not with discomfort, but with a look of intense, analytical curiosity. He ignored Harrison completely, his gaze fixed on Maya. He took a few steps forward, closing the distance, his eyes scanning her face as if piecing together a complex puzzle. He noted her posture, the unwavering stillness, the focused calm in her eyes that seemed so out of place for a chauffeur being publicly berated. It was a look he'd seen before, in the heat of competition, in the eyes of people pushing the absolute limits of human and mechanical endurance. "Forgive me," Richter began, his voice now softer, directed only at her. "Your face is familiar to me. Have we met?" Before Maya could formulate a diplomatic, non-committal answer, Harrison, incensed at being usurped, blustered. "Herr Richter, this is nobody. She is my driver, that is all. She is of no consequence." Richter held up a hand, silencing Harrison with a single effortless gesture. He never took his eyes off Maya. "I do not think so," he said slowly. Then, his eyes widened slightly as the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The name. The face. The legendary composure. "Mein Gott," he breathed, a genuine smile breaking across his stern features. "You are Maya Jimenez. The Matador. Maya the Matador Jimenez." The name hung in the air, electric and confusing to most but not to all. A few of the younger German engineers looked up, their expressions shifting from confusion to dawning comprehension. Harrison just looked baffled. What did you call her?" Richter turned to the stunned crowd, his voice now booming with the passion of a true enthusiast. "Gentlemen, you do not understand who stands before you. This is not just a driver. This is the woman who held off Schumacher for 12 laps at Hockenheim with a failing gearbox. This is the woman who took a third-place podium at Suzuka in a torrential downpour, in a car that had no business being in the top 10. He turned back to Maya, his eyes alight with pure, unadulterated respect. "I watched that race from the pits. We were developing sensor technology for your team that season. Your telemetry it was impossible. What you were doing with that car, it was art. You are a legend of the sport." The reversal was instantaneous and brutal. Harrison Sterling IV's face, which had been a mask of smug superiority, collapsed into a canvas of slack-jawed disbelief. The world had just been turned upside down. The woman he had been systematically humiliating, the help he had dismissed as incompetent and invisible, was a celebrated icon in the very industry he so desperately wanted to impress. The German executives were now looking at Maya with awe and at Harrison with something bordering on contempt. Richter, seeing Harrison's dumbfounded expression, twisted the knife with surgical precision. "Mr. Sterling," he said, his voice now cold as ice, "you have a woman of this caliber, this legendary skill and composure, as your personal driver, and you berate her in public for your own forgetfulness? You speak of good help? You do not deserve to be in the same vehicle as her." He then turned his back on Harrison completely, extending a hand to Maya. "Frau Jimenez, it is an honor. A true honor. Forgive this display. I would be grateful if you would join us for this meeting. Frankly, your insights on vehicle dynamics would be infinitely more valuable than anything Mr. Sterling might have to say." The humiliation was complete. Maya, vindicated, looked at Klaus Richter and saw not a savior, but an equal, someone who saw her for who she was, for what she had achieved. She shook his offered hand, a small genuine smile finally touching her lips. The isolated protagonist was now the guest of honor, and the snob was left standing alone, exposed as an arrogant, ignorant fool in the wreckage of his own making. Maya inclined her head gracefully. "Thank you, Herr Richter. I accept." She walked with him towards the clubhouse, leaving Harrison Sterling standing frozen on the veranda, his face a mottled mask of crimson and white. The small group of his own employees, who had previously been sycophantic, now refused to meet his eye, their gazes shifting between the floor and Maya's retreating form with a new profound respect. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had been shattered and completely rewritten. Inside the boardroom, the atmosphere was transformed. Klaus Richter pulled out a chair for Maya at the main table, a gesture of deference that did not go unnoticed. Harrison stumbled in moments later, taking his seat in a stunned, resentful silence. The meeting began, but its focus had irrevocably changed. When discussing vehicle handling and performance metrics, Richter would frequently turn to Maya. "Frau Jimenez, from a driver's perspective, what is your take on haptic feedback in steering columns?" he'd ask. And Maya, drawing on years of experience, would provide concise, brilliant insights that were both practical and visionary. She spoke of the delicate balance between road feel and electronic assistance, the subtle cues a car gives at its limit, things Harrison, who only saw cars as status symbols, could never comprehend. The German engineers listened, rapt, occasionally jotting down notes. She wasn't just a former driver. She was a master of her craft. Harrison was forced to endure the excruciating spectacle of his lowly driver being treated as the most important person in the room. His own contributions were met with polite, but cool indifference from the German team. He was a ghost at his own merger meeting. The deal he had pinned his reputation on was now entirely out of his hands, held in the palm of the woman he had tried to crush. After the formal presentation, as refreshments were served, Harrison made a desperate, clumsy attempt at damage control. He approached Maya, his posture awkward, his usual arrogance replaced by a pathetic attempt at contrition. "Look, Miss, I apologize for what happened out there. I was under a lot of pressure." Maya looked at him, her expression unreadable. She didn't offer the forgiveness he was begging for. "The pressure you feel, Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "is a consequence of your own actions, not mine." She then turned away, leaving him to stew in his public disgrace. Later, as the Germans were preparing to leave, Klaus Richter took Maya aside. "Frau Jimenez," he said, his tone serious, "what you did in your past career required immense integrity and courage. What I saw today showed me you have lost neither of those qualities." He paused, his blue eyes direct. "My company is on the verge of launching a new performance division. We are building the next generation of driver-centric vehicles. We need people who understand the soul of a machine. People like you." He offered her his business card. "This is my personal number. I am not offering you a job as a driver. I am offering you a position as a senior consultant and test driver for our performance dynamics team. Name your price. We would be honored to have you." The offer hung in the air, shimmering with possibility. It was more than a job. It was a return on her own terms to the world she had loved. It was a validation that her skills, her character, and her hard-earned experience were her most valuable assets. This incident, born of humiliation, had not only restored her honor, but had also unlocked a future she hadn't dared to dream of since her retirement. As Maya watched Harrison's Bentley, now being driven by a valet he had to sheepishly summon, pull away, she felt a profound sense of peace. Her quiet life was over, but a better one was just beginning. She had been tested not on a racetrack but in the arena of character, and she had won. The message was clear, echoing in the quiet respect of those around her. True worth is not inherited or bought, but forged in the crucible of integrity and effort. The fallout for Harrison Sterling IV was swift and devastating. News of his conduct, embellished and spread with glee by his own subordinates, rippled through the corporate world. Klaus Richter, a man who valued character as much as capital, made his position clear. The merger would proceed, but with a new condition. Harrison Sterling IV was to be sidelined from any leadership role in the combined entity. He was relegated to a figurehead position on the board, a man with a title but no power, a permanent reminder of his spectacular misjudgment. He kept his wealth, but he lost the one thing he craved more: respect. He became a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms and at country clubs. 6 months later, the sterile scent of gasoline and hot asphalt was Maya's perfume once again. She stood on the observation deck of a private test track near the Nürburgring, the crisp German air biting at her cheeks. Below her, a prototype sports sedan, clad in black and white camouflage, carved a perfect line through a chicane. She wasn't watching from the sidelines. She had just spent the last 4 hours pushing that car to its absolute limits, her feedback already being dissected by a team of engineers who now treated her words as gospel. She had accepted Klaus Richter's offer. The transition had been a whirlwind of contracts and relocation, but for the first time in years, Maya felt she was exactly where she was supposed to be. She was no longer hiding from her past but embracing it. Her legend, far from being a liability, was her greatest asset. Richter's company even launched a marketing campaign for their new performance division, with Maya as its face, not as a model, but as the architect of its driving soul. The ads showed her on the track, her face a mask of intense concentration, a picture of skill and authority. The irony was not lost on her. The job she had taken to be invisible had ultimately made her more visible than ever. Working for Harrison had been a trial by fire, a constant, grinding assault on her sense of self. Yet, by enduring it with professionalism and grace, she had shown her true strength. She realized that her time as a chauffeur wasn't a demeaning chapter but a necessary one. It had taught her that dignity wasn't something bestowed by a job title, or the admiration of a crowd. It was something you carried within you, immutable and untouchable. Looking out at the track, a powerful engine roaring in the distance, Maya felt a sense of completion. She had come full circle, but she was not the same woman who had left the F1 paddock. She had been tested in ways she never expected and had emerged not just vindicated, but whole. Her new success wasn't just a reward for her talent, but for her unwavering integrity. It was a powerful, resounding affirmation that in the end, it is not the station you are born into or the job you hold that defines you, but the character you build and the quiet dignity you refuse to surrender.